Hey everyone, welcome back to the Art2Life podcast. So great to have you be here and listening. So thanks for that. So I'm so excited because I love this subject we're going to be diving into. It's around working, or rather, how to work less but better, which is the theme of everything I'm trying to do all the time. I'm just always asking myself, how can I do this thing? Do less of it because I'm always trying to do too many things. I tend to do too much of everything. But if I lessen it, but make it better. Okay. So I just love that right out of the gate, how to work less, which creates spaciousness and possibilities for all kinds of new things to come in. And by not sacrificing something because you're doing less of it, but it gets better. So this is a win-win, and I can't wait to dive into this. So, couple points. I'm going to go over three things here with this, and any one of them, I think if you can kind of grok it, that it could be helpful for you. So the first one is something that has been huge for me, and it's really behind behind Art2Life, and it was a hunch early on that there was there was a life component to art making that had a big impact on art. I now understand that 1,000%, and so that relates to what I'm about to share with you, and it's about flow state. Flow state. And it's kind of good to have a definition of it because we throw that word around a lot. And how I like to think of it is that flow state happens. It happens when we're making art, but it can happen at any time when you're so engrossed in the thing you're doing that you're just completely present with whatever you're doing. One of the big workarounds or reframes for people who never have enough time is they just need to spend more time being in flow, because when you're in flow, that anxiety goes away because you're not actually thinking about how you better hurry up, because you're just completely immersed in what you're doing. Time stands still. You feel yourself mostly. What you don't feel is anxiety. You don't compare your work to other people's when you're in flow state. You're just in it. You feel more alive, which, if you've listened to this podcast for any number of episodes, I'm constantly pointing towards this feeling as a North Star for all of us. It's around our art making and our life making, actually. So it turns out that you don't need to be making art all the time, but just learn about this practice of flow state. Practice the way you think when you're in flow state in other parts of your life. So if you're not making your art, you can bring this presence to whatever it is you're doing, right? Like, if you think of doing the laundry as a chore, if you just turn off flow state, if you turn off creativity because it's just dumb laundry, and I'm separating my art from my life. But if you think of laundry and you're hanging it up outside and you start thinking about it in terms of, composing different colors, of putting different shirts next to different shirts against the blue sky on the clothesline, how can you bring in how you think around your art making, whether it's abstract or realistic, what it is about your art making that lights you up? How does the things you're experiencing in your life bring you back into that? So just feeling a little bit of that presence. Like, I can be driving in the car, and I love long car rides. I just like sitting there because I can get so excited just on my own, thinking about all the things I'm going to do when I get there, or just having that space, and I completely drop in, and it keeps me in the art making mindset. And so that's how you're able to, when you come back into your art making, it's like you're just right in it. And it allows you to, you might not have been making art all week, but when you drop in, you come in on that Saturday, your brain's already in it, and you can just drop into it instead of that period of time when you feel like the less you do, the less you do, and then you beat yourself up, and you come into your studio after being away for a long time and you feel like a stranger. You're a stranger to the way you think. And if you think only this flow way, if you only think you can only get in a creative headspace in your studio or in front of your art, that's the problem. You want to start incorporating this into your life. I've done a couple round the world plane ticket trips, uh, long periods of time, 9 months, a year, just traveling when I was younger, and it gave me an absolute love of traveling. It's one of my favorite things to do. I'm just addicted to it. But it's interesting, when you do a long trip like that, it doesn't take too long before you start feeling like another city, and it's a lot of work. You're just moving all the time, and you never get a chance to settle in. You're just moving, which is the cool thing, but it's also the tiring thing. And so what happened on these trips was the postcard writing and the working in your sketchbook became a really important part of the trip. That there would be half the time, instead of you're in a really amazing town in Italy and you go out in the morning and then you come back and you just work in your sketchbook. You do create postcards and write to your friends or whatever. That it was this time of integration of what you were seeing, processing it in your own head and making it relevant to you, instead of constantly being bombarded by all the sights and all the sounds. What is it about that Italian town, or the flowers you saw, or the smells, or the sounds? What was particularly potent to you, and why? How does that fit in, right? You need to process those experiences. So this is a way what that was teaching me, and it's something I've learned, was that I have to integrate it. I have to like treat it like art. That my life has to have this art aspect to it. That my life is a work of art. And so that's kind of the workaround here. You want to start converting your life more to be like your art. I don't know any other way to say it. And it's literally not your art, but the thinking is used in your life more and more and more. So your life becomes a piece of art, like your art, like the way you think, why you get excited. When you go to the farmer's market, are you just shopping for food? Or are you thinking about the colors? Are you thinking about the textures? Are you taking pictures with your iPhone? How can you use what it is you're doing in your life to answer the questions of your art? That is a kind of staying closer to this flow state, to dropping in to what completely engrosses you, and that you lose track of time, that you're just feeling more like yourself than any other time. So that's kind of like the first idea, is just kind of staying in flow state with it, right? The second idea around this being more efficient is coming into your studio fresh. Coming in, if you come in day after day after day, and believe me, I know because I've done this, trying to do something and kind of pushing it, it gets really redundant. It starts all kind of running together. And I think this is why we procrastinate. If you are procrastinating around your art, sometimes your art is behind you, behind where you are in your life. And sometimes your art's ahead of your life. It's interesting. they're not always in lockstep, but when your art is behind you, it doesn't really feel that relevant to your life. I don't know if that makes sense. And it's kind of a grind a little bit. And we tend to not want to go into the studio. It doesn't feel easy. Um, and this is why we procrastinate. So the procrastination comes as it's smart. It's like, well, probably doesn't feel that great, so you might want to just like not do it. So we have to get excited again. And how we do this is by bringing something new in, by injecting something into our art practice that lights us up. One of the hardest patches in my life was trying to make a go of fine art. And this was probably like 20 years ago now or whatever, 15 years ago. And I'd always done art, but I hadn't really relied on it for my income entirely. And I was just determined, I had to. I didn't have any other choice. This was all. Don't have a lot of experience doing anything else except art. And I was thinking that if I just worked really hard, that my art would get better. And to a certain extent, it's true. You have to work hard, but at a certain point, the return isn't there, and you're just pushing yourself so hard, and so it just starts to get like flat and boring, because your soul needs differences. It needs freshness. It needs change. It needs to feel like there's newness coming in. I mean, we're hardwired for this. And this is why art answers the call of that so beautifully. If you allow it to change, if you allow your art to change, and if you listen to last week's podcast, I was talking about objectivity, right? And how if we just hold too tight to what it is, and we think that we are our art, and that's how it's going to be forevermore, we get stuck, and it doesn't feel good, and it gets stiff, and we're white knuckling in our art. So it's the same thing with our practice. We need to be coming into it and to be feeling fresh, and to be feeling like there's possibility for change. When I got stuck in this, when I was just kind of grinding away, I got really kind of shut in, feeling kind of isolated, and I just wasn't around people a lot. I was making my art by myself, mostly in a studio. You'd see people a little bit, but I was working on the weekends. I'd work at night. I just as much as I could to try to get this art going. And in my desperation, I thought, well, I got to do something. I started to teach. I started to invite, I did these little classes, and it was really cool. They were just on once a week, and it was Wednesday night, and it was the best. It was so fun because there was music, and we'd bring food, and it was just a ball. And I remember these times. So they just brought me back to the surface. And it completely invigorated my practice. What I did is I brought, you guys in. It was like the people, this community. I brought the community into my studio with me. And that's what did it. So not that you need to do that, but the workaround in this, and I literally think of it as, because for me, if you have a studio or a place you work where it gets kind of like stale, is think about bringing something in. What can I bring into the studio that would like fuel my thing? If you're doing realistic birds, maybe you bring in a new book on birds, or what can I bring in that will be different and fresh, literally like that fresh thing in the room. I remember I brought in this wooden duck actually to my studio, and it was a decoy, and it was so cool, and I just loved the shape of it and simplicity. I had it there forever. But here's the part that I tend to do now. I'll bring something in, but then the next piece of this is, what can you bring out? What can you take out that is no longer needed? because you don't want to just start filling your studio with a bunch of stuff, because believe me, that duck thing is no longer there. It became tiresome. I painted it blue for a while and then I gave it away. But what is it that you want to bring in? I've been bringing in flowers into my studio, and it is so cool. Like, just the forms, those forms are so beautiful, and it's like, it seems kind of extravagant, like no one's even saying, I'm the only one there, but I see it, and every time I see it, it's like, what? They inspire me. The colors, the gradations of the flowers and the petals, all of it. So that's a really great workaround. And then, as a side note, here's another thing you could try that is kind of great. Like, and it's always, for me, it's around people, because I get really busy and I need people in my life. I'll do like a date night in my studio where I will invite someone to come. I'll treat them to dinner that's delivered, take out, deliver, or whatever. And it's like, either they come and they do art with me, and I'll even set them up, and I'm going to be making art and they can come, or, and I've even done this too, they just come and hang out, and I'll set it up that way. I'll be like, listen, I'd still love to see you. Listen, I'm going to be kind of working late in the studio, but I'd love to buy you dinner. Do you want to come by and talk? I'll just be painting and we can talk. I'd love to show you what I'm doing. And it's kind of great, and people are talking, and I'm having a conversation that I would never have while I'm making my art. I'm curious, if you guys have ever tried this, because it's really something. It's like you bring more into your world as you're making art, and they're asking you questions and things you'd never even think about. And again, it relates to that episode I did last week around objectivity, that you can't possibly be white knuckling it if you're joking around, laughing, you're eating French fries and you're answering questions. You can kind of do pretty amazing art. I don't know. So that's just a sort of another way to bring a person into your studio once a week. Okay, so the third piece of this about making your art easier, or making your work less but better. I mean, working less but better, making it easier but better, more efficient, is asking yourself why. Why do I make the art that I do? So this is kind of next level. Your art says something about you, and asking yourself that question and wondering about that question, why you make what you make, it really has a huge payoff, because you get to cross-reference it with the thing that you're making, right? Like, does why you're making it and the thoughts around it, when you look at it, so you write this down on a piece of paper, you go to the side and you work on this thing, and then you look at the art you're making, and you can ask yourself, is the art related? Does it connect? Is it really actually doing that? So you can see the disparity, if there is one, and there usually is. And it's this thing of, like, your art and your life. The life part is like, why are you making this? What is behind this? And then often the art hasn't caught up yet with where you are. And that's why there's a disconnect. So when you get that congruency, when you adjust your art, it gets really good faster, because you're not just making another sort of mediocre one that actually really isn't what you want, but it's kind of okay and just it's habitual. So this is a huge a tip here, and so having that, even a small adjustment, even if you're not even sure, and it's not that you need to know why exactly, but just putting a few key words to it can be helpful. Because then you can do a micro adjustment on your art, and a small little adjustment after, now, a year from now, will have a huge consequence about where your art goes and where it ends up. You want to have something to compare and contrast with what you're making. And so your why around your art will help you ascertain what you're making. and again, when there's not a congruency between these two things, our art tends to not stays the same. And you know that period when it just is just flat. It's the most, and we talk to so many artists like this that's why they come into the creative visionary program. We're talking about how to shift their work. We want to make it a big jump. How do we do that? Well, it has a lot to do with this. Getting that clarity produces that. I believe that your soul already knows the kind of art you need to be making. This is just me, but I think it knows, and what it wants is it craves new. There's an intelligence, an inner intelligence you have, a wisdom, an intuition, and the main thing your soul wants is it wants you to evolve. It wants you to expand. It wants you to make your best art, and it wants you to change. It wants you to change and migrate into something that feels more and more like you. And that is often comes with, it's something that has there's a little fear with this, a little risk, a little vulnerability, because it's something that's going to be new. Our soul wants the change. I started teaching, right? I told you that story. I started teaching, and it was so informative on my work. And it took me a little while to understand, like, well, what am I doing? Like, why does this relate to my art? Why am I making art? What is my art about? And my art is about possibility. My whole life, is about empowering myself, but other people, mostly because I have struggled with not having the confidence to do things, and wondering if I could, wondering if all the mythologies that people had were true, and I don't know if it's just how I was raised or whatever, but I have this conviction that this art making thing, and when you set your mind to something, that you can kind of do it. You can make anything's possible. And I find this through teaching. I absolutely love this process of sharing information and then seeing what people do with it. I mean, it's just the most gratifying thing to see it and feel like, wow, I actually helped someone. That feels so good. And they're just off and running and doing their thing, and they're helping other people now. But also to kind of remind myself what's possible for myself. So that's what I was learning by helping people, by teaching people. And my art is about possibility. What my actual physical art, there's a buoyancy about it. There's a vibrancy about it. There's a reckless and a recklessness to it, and a huge trusting part of it. A very big part of intuition. It's a trusting. It's a belief that what my senses are telling me is true, and that's going to take care of everything, and that there's this possibility for me that people will resonate with this work, that they will feel that way. And I've had people actually say this to me, that they want to have it feels like there's an optimism and a hopefulness. And I mean, I don't know if you've seen my work, but it's not a literal thing at all. But do you see how that why starts relating? And so I can kind of look at and it gets to change, of course, but I get to look at my work, and I can also look at my purpose, look at my why, and like connect those two things. And when there's congruence, the work gets stronger, meaning it gets more like me, and it gets more personal. And again, that unique look to your work, that personality that doesn't really resemble other people's work, is what is the business plan here, is how people can crush it in art making and sell tons of work. So that's the workaround. Pretty simple. And know that this is going to change over time. You just have to get a little bit of this down, but write down why you make your art. Write it down what it is about your art, and then that lights you up. and why. Why do you do it? It's kind of amazing. There is a reason you do it. And if you don't know, I mean, you should at least be curious. It can take time, right, to understand this. The process of your art making is this process of learning about yourself. So I understand that you don't have to know in the beginning, but the question is a good one. The question's great. And then whatever information you can gain from it, then look at your art and see if it feels, if there's resonance a little bit. And if it's way off, that's a really great thing to notice. So what's going on? When you choose things in your art, the things that you like, the decisions, and all art making is a whole bunch of yes, no decisions. All those yeses, they relate back to your why. They relate back to the essential part of yourself. And it's so cool to kind of like review that and just have that as a ongoing inquiry. Anyway, so those are some of the ways that I think about my art making, that my art making isn't something that I have to fit in anymore. My art making is this really cool practice that I can make amazing things in the time that I have available. Who cares if, as long as you love what you're doing and you like the results of what you're doing, and you see that it's changing and it's improving, whether like, that is just a positive. It doesn't matter if you don't need to beat yourself up because you didn't work 15 hours this week or 30 hours or 50 hours or whatever. That you're just engaged in this really, really cool process. That if you can do this so much better by not trying so hard, by just working in conjunction, working in coordination with who you are, right? And bringing that into your life and bringing your art into that, and the work will get better. So it's kind of like having your cake and eating it too. You get to fit this in, and your art can get even stronger regardless. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. I've mentioned this a couple times now. We've got an amazing, if you go to Art2Life podcasts, there's a little button on the right-hand side of the page, a little yellow button you can click on that says asking a question. You can record a question, and I'm going to be answering some of those questions. I can't answer all of them. I hope you understand that, but I will be able to have your voice played on this podcast, and that would be so cool to actually hear from you guys and have this be more of a conversation. So anyway, go check that out. That's at art2lifepodcast.com. And I read everything. I listen to everything. But again, I can only do so many things. So any questions or thoughts you have about what we've been talking about, I'd love to hear them, so I can share them with everybody on another episode. If this was helpful, you guys, please go leave a review. That would be so good. More and more people are listening to this, and it's just the most gratifying feeling to see that. It's like, God, 50 more people listen to this. It's so cool. And there's so many people in this community, and there's so many people that are out there that are just dying to explore their creativity and make art if that's a possibility for them. So I appreciate you being here and sharing this, leaving a review, or especially that's really great, or sharing this with a friend. So thanks, you guys. I appreciate you, and I will see you next week. Okay, thanks so much.